"Madam, please, don't talk." Clara's trembling, pleading whisper wasn't just a statement. It was a silent scream that tore through the quiet stillness of the room, a frail, shaking finger pressed against her lips. In her eyes, desperation fought a battle with resolve. In stark contrast, the woman facing her, billionaire Eleanor Vance, was stunned into a deadly silence. Outside the door, the heavy, deliberate footsteps of Julian Vance grew closer, steady as the ticking of a doomsday clock. Money and power were meaningless in this moment. The fate of an empire rested on the silence of two women, one seeking freedom, the other trying to bury the truth. It all began on a stormy day, when Clara, a young maid, first stepped into Hale Manor, a place of luxury, yet shrouded in darkness. Clara became the 13th maid at Vance Manor. That number hadn't brought luck to anyone before her. Among domestic staff, Vance Manor was known as a tragic legend. People didn't fear ghosts. They feared the silence. The 12 predecessors had all fled, not because of the endless cleaning or the strict rules, but because they couldn't endure the icy loneliness that seeped into their bones. It was a gilded cage, beautiful but without a song. But Clara didn't have the luxury of choice. Her only option was tied to the faint heartbeat of a little boy who wasn't her own. The image of her brother, Leo, with his pale skin and colorless lips in a hospital bed, was the sole motivation pushing her forward. The doctor said he needed an operation, one that cost more than she could ever dream of earning in a lifetime. So, Vance Manor wasn't just a job, it was her only hope. She took a deep breath, the cold morning air filling her lungs, and pushed open the heavy iron gate. It let out a mournful creak, as if reluctantly revealing a secret it had long tried to hide. Her employer, Eleanor Vance, was waiting in the main hall. She looked like a statue carved from ice. A dark blue silk dress hugged her tall, perfect figure, and her platinum hair was pulled into a neat bun without a single strand out of place. But what impressed Clara most were her eyes, ash-gray, deep and empty. They looked at her, scanning from head to toe, as if evaluating a new piece of furniture to see if it was worthy of being in her home. "Here is the list of rules," Eleanor said, her voice completely devoid of emotion. She handed Clara a thick stack of papers. "Read them carefully. Memorize them. I don't like to repeat myself." Standing beside her was Julian Vance, her young husband. He was the complete opposite of Lady Eleanor. If she was winter, he was a radiant summer. His golden hair, clear blue eyes, and bright smile could make any girl's heart flutter. He stepped forward and extended his hand to Clara. "Welcome to Vance Manor," he said, his voice warm. "Don't let my wife's demeanor scare you. She's just a little dedicated to her work." He gave her a playful wink. Clara timidly took his hand. His hand was warm, but the handshake was perfunctory, lacking sincerity. She bowed her head, avoiding both of their gazes. She had a feeling she had just stepped into a play, and she had no idea what her role was. The first few days were exactly as the rumors described. Silence was the dominant sound. Clara's footsteps on the marble floor seemed to tread lightly, afraid of disturbing the manor's solemn stillness. She moved like a shadow, cleaning soulless statues and picture frames with no smiles in them. She realized the loneliness in Lady Eleanor's eyes wasn't her imagination. Her employer had everything, yet she was always alone. She dined alone at a long table that could seat 20 people. She read alone in the vast library. Even when Julian was with her, they seemed to exist in two parallel worlds. One night, insomnia plagued Clara. Images of Leo flickered in her mind. She couldn't stand the suffocating silence in her attic room anymore. She tiptoed downstairs, the darkness enveloping her. Moonlight streamed through a large window, illuminating a corner of the living room. There, a grand, glossy black piano stood, covered in a thin layer of dust, a testament to how long it had been forgotten. An inexplicable urge drew her closer. She gently lifted the lid, her calloused fingers, rough from work, hesitantly hovered over the cold ivory keys. She began to play, not a complex classical piece, but a simple lullaby her mother used to sing to her and her brother. The melody was sad and poignant, weaving through every corner of the manor like a lament for shattered dreams and unspoken sorrows. Upstairs, in her opulent bedroom, Eleanor Vance's eyes suddenly opened. The music was faint but clear enough to pull her from her fitful sleep. She listened. The melody was so familiar, so heartbreaking. It touched a deep corner of her frozen heart, a place she had tried to bury for a long time. She didn't go downstairs. She just lay there, letting the notes soothe and comfort her until the music stopped and the familiar silence returned. The next morning, as Clara was cleaning the hallway, Eleanor walked by. She stopped, her eyes still looking straight ahead. "From now on," she said, her voice still cold but with a subtle difference, "you may play the piano, as long as it doesn't disturb me." Clara looked up, astonished. It was the first time Eleanor had spoken to her without giving a command. A small, almost invisible crack had appeared in the icy wall between the two women. But it was this very fragile connection that unintentionally pushed Clara onto a deadly path. That afternoon, while trimming roses in the large garden, she overheard a conversation. Julian was standing behind the hedge wall, his back to her. He was on the phone and seemed to think no one was around. He didn't bother to whisper, "Don't worry." Julian's voice was no longer sweet. It had become cruel and cold. "This drug leaves no trace. After 48 hours, everything vanishes. Just a little stress is all it takes. She has no children, no heir. Everything will be mine." Clara froze. Her entire body went cold and stiff. The pruning shears slipped from her hand, falling onto the gravel with a harsh, sharp clang that echoed in the quiet garden. Julian started and turned around. Luckily, the hedge was thick enough to hide her. He glanced around for a moment, then quickly ended his call and walked away. Clara remained rooted to the spot, her heart pounding against her ribs. She wanted to scream, she wanted to run, to get as far away as possible from this place, from the devil in human skin. But then the image of her brother appeared, weak and needing her. Then came the lonely eyes of Eleanor, the woman who had just let her glimpse a hidden part of her soul. "She has no children. Everything will be mine." Julian's words echoed in her mind. No, she couldn't leave. To leave would mean condemning Eleanor to death. To leave would mean letting evil win. From that moment on, Clara was no longer just a maid looking to earn money. She had become a silent protector, a lone soldier in a war she didn't know if she had a chance of winning. Vance Manor rarely hosted parties, but when it did, they were grand enough to be the talk of the town's elite for weeks. That night, the enormous crystal chandeliers in the main hall radiated a light as brilliant as 1,000 diamonds. The soft, gentle sound of jazz music permeated every corner of the room, blending with the laughter and clinking glasses of guests in expensive evening gowns. Eleanor Vance, in a shimmering silver gown that hugged her figure, looked like a true queen. Her cold beauty seemed to radiate even more brightly under the lights. She moved through the crowd with a regal bearing, but Clara could see the weariness hidden behind her perfect social smile. Julian was always by her side, playing the part of the perfect husband. He was constantly smiling, personally pouring wine for guests, and telling stale jokes that still made everyone laugh. He was a master actor. Clara, in her simple black and white maid's uniform, moved silently like a shadow amidst the luxurious crowd. She carried a tray of champagne flutes, trying to keep her breathing steady, but her heart pounded like a war drum in her chest. She didn't dare take her eyes off Julian for a second. She knew that a crowded, noisy place like this, where everyone's attention was divided, was the perfect stage for a crime. And then she saw it. Julian skillfully separated from a group of guests and headed to the bar. He motioned for the bartender to step away, saying he wanted to personally prepare a special drink for his wife. His back was to the crowd, blocking the view for most people, but Clara, from her position, could see everything clearly. She saw his hand tremble slightly as he discreetly pulled a tiny, unlabeled glass vial from his inner jacket pocket. In a flash, he added a few drops of clear liquid into a bubbling glass of champagne. Then, he put the vial away and turned back with a radiant smile as if nothing had happened. He took the glass of wine and walked toward Eleanor. "My love," he said, his voice as sweet as honey, which made Clara feel sick. "I got you your favorite champagne." Eleanor smiled, a polite, weary smile. Perhaps she was too tired to notice anything unusual. She reached out her hand, preparing to take the glass. Clara's heart stopped. The world around her seemed to slow down. She had to do something. Right now. She couldn't scream. She couldn't run and snatch the glass. He would deny it, and she would be fired, or worse. There was no time to think. Her body acted before her mind. She walked straight toward them with her tray of drinks, her eyes cast down as if she was focused on her work. When she was just a few feet away, she deliberately tripped on the edge of the rug. She stumbled forward. "Oh," she cried out. The tray tilted. Dozens of glass flutes clinked together and then crashed to the floor, creating a chaotic mess of shattered glass and wine at Eleanor's feet. The poisoned glass in Julian's hand, due to the unexpected collision, also slipped from his grasp and shattered. All sound in the room died down. The music stopped. All eyes turned to Clara, who was standing frozen in the crime scene. She quickly bent over, her voice trembling as if she were about to cry. "Madam, I'm so sorry. I apologize. A big bug flew into my tray. I'm truly sorry." Julian looked at her, his blue eyes narrowing. His perfect smile was gone, replaced by a cold, hateful glare. He knew. In a brief moment, their eyes met, and he knew this was no accident. "You clumsy fool," he hissed, no longer maintaining his suave facade. His voice was full of contempt. "Do you know how much Mrs. Vance's dress costs? Her shoes are worth more than your annual salary. Get out of my sight." His insult stung, but she could only mumble an apology and retreat quickly, feeling Julian's dagger-like gaze on her back. But she also felt another pair of eyes, the analytical and suspicious eyes of Arthur Lexington, a distinguished lawyer and Eleanor's confidant, who was standing in a corner of the room. He had seen everything, and it seemed he didn't believe the story about the bug. After the party ended awkwardly, and the last guests had left, a chilling silence once again enveloped the manor. Clara was cleaning up the last of the shattered glass on the floor when the butler arrived, his voice unfriendly. "The mistress wants to see you in her study." Her heart tightened. She knew she couldn't avoid it anymore. In the study, Eleanor sat behind a massive wooden desk, her face as cold as ice. The golden light from the desk lamp illuminated only half of her face, creating a powerful play of light and shadow. "Who do you think you are, causing such a scene at my party?" she began, her voice devoid of emotion, yet each word was like a whip lashing through the air. "Do you know that your actions just made me look like someone who can't manage her staff? Do you know?" Suddenly, Clara heard a sound. Julian's light but deliberate footsteps were approaching down the hallway. He was heading this way. She knew if Julian heard this argument, he would suspect everything, and it would all be over. In a reckless moment, she looked up, placed her index finger on her lips, and looked pleadingly straight into Eleanor's eyes. "Madam, please," she whispered, her voice rushed and barely audible. "Don't say another word." Eleanor was stunned. She had never seen anyone dare to give her an order, let alone a young maid who had just caused a major commotion. The audacity was unbelievable, but the genuine panic in Clara's eyes, a fear that wasn't for herself but seemed to be for Eleanor, silenced her. Just then, Julian's shadow passed the slightly ajar door. His footsteps went by and faded down the hall. In the room, a stifling silence settled. The air was thick with tension. That single moment of deadly tension planted a seed of deep suspicion in Eleanor's mind. She looked at Clara, no longer with the eyes of a mistress to a maid, but with the eyes of a chess player looking at an unexpected and mysterious move. She realized this was no accident. This was a warning. The moment of deadly silence in the study changed everything. Eleanor didn't fire Clara. She just stared at her for a long time, then waved her hand. "Get out." But from that night on, a silent Cold War began. Eleanor watched Clara with a scrutinizing gaze, while Clara was always on guard, watching Julian's every move. She knew she had put a target on her own back, and Julian was just waiting for the right moment to take his shot. She couldn't just sit and wait to die. She needed proof, something solid to bring to light. Driven by the impending danger, Clara took a risk. She took advantage of an afternoon when Julian was out playing golf, a habit he almost never broke. She knew she only had a few hours. Her heart pounding in her chest, she sneaked into his private study, a place even Eleanor rarely entered. The room was perfectly arranged to the point of being sterile, with no personal items, no photographs. Everything was neat, calculated, just like its owner. Clara began her search, wearing gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints. Books, drawers, file cabinets, everything was suspiciously clean. He was too careful, too smart to leave traces in obvious places. But then she remembered that overly confident people often have a weakness. They are arrogant. They like to keep their trophies as a way of self-congratulation. Her eyes stopped at an old-looking leather-bound book on the shelf, standing out among the brand-new business books. The Art of War by Sun Tzu. A cliché choice for someone like Julian. She lifted it. The book was lighter than she expected. As she flipped through the pages, she felt a slight bulge on the back cover. She used her fingernail to pry it open. A small, hollowed-out compartment was meticulously carved inside the book cover, and there, a tiny black USB lay neatly. She knew this was what she needed. She quickly hid it in her apron pocket and hurried out of the room, her heart still racing. But Clara didn't know that she had underestimated Julian's paranoia. He had installed a miniature tracking software on his computer, activated by a motion sensor in the room. The moment she left, his phone received an alert along with a short video clip of her silhouette. His smile froze on the golf course. He knew exactly what that little mouse had done. He didn't get angry. He didn't make a call. He was frighteningly calm. He silently launched the most vicious and cruel retaliation, a blow straight to where Clara was most vulnerable. The next day, Clara received a call from the hospital. Not from the doctor, but from a sweet, unfamiliar nurse. The nurse announced a surprising piece of good news. An anonymous charity had agreed to fully fund Leo's surgery, and they were finalizing the transfer to a leading cardiology hospital in another city that very afternoon. Clara was overjoyed to the point of tears. Finally, a miracle had arrived. She thanked the nurse profusely, tears streaming down her face. But just a few hours later, when she called her usual doctor to confirm, a cold feeling ran down her spine. The doctor said there was no charity, no transfer procedure. Her brother had vanished. The nurse on duty said 2 men in medical uniforms had come and taken the boy, claiming it was at the family's request. They had what looked like valid paperwork. Clara's heart felt like it was being crushed. She ran like crazy to her room, her legs trembling, and then her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. It was a photo. Leo was tied to a chair in a dark, old room, his mouth taped shut, his eyes wide with fear. Below the picture was a chilling message. 1 word, and you'll get a body back. Clara completely collapsed. She sank to the floor, her phone falling from her hand. She had lost. Julian had won. He had found and attacked her only weakness. She sobbed, a silent, desperate cry. But in the midst of her utter despair, an image flashed in her mind. Arthur Lexington's observant, analytical eyes at the party. The old lawyer didn't trust Julian. He had seen something. That was her only hope, as fragile as a single thread in a storm. She wiped her tears and stood up. The pain turned into fury, into the recklessness of someone who had nothing left to lose. She went to Arthur Lexington's office, her face pale but her eyes burning with determination. She didn't say much, just placed the USB on his desk. "I have nothing left to lose," she said, her voice hoarse from crying. "But Eleanor does. This contains the proof. Please, believe me." Arthur, after examining the contents of the USB on a secure computer, was completely shocked. It contained not only a detailed poisoning plan and shady transactions with a fake doctor, but also forged emails created to frame Eleanor after her death, making it look like a suicide due to business pressure. The level of sophistication and cruelty of the plot was far beyond his imagination. He realized the gravity of the situation and immediately arranged a secret meeting between the three of them at a safe house in the suburbs. There, in a small room, Arthur presented the evidence logically and clearly. Eleanor listened in silence. When Arthur projected the forged emails onto the screen, along with Julian's messages to his mistress discussing what they would do with the vast fortune, her stoic face began to crack. She had once loved this man. She had ignored every warning from her friends, every suspicious sign, simply because she longed for a home and someone to lean on. And now, this horrible betrayal was like a knife plunged straight into her heart. A few rare tears she had suppressed for so many years, began to roll down her cheeks. She was completely broken. Clara looked at her, filled with profound compassion. She stepped forward and, without a word, gently placed a handkerchief in Eleanor's trembling hand. After a long silence, Eleanor looked up. The vulnerability was gone. Her red-rimmed eyes were now cold and determined, like a general's before a life-or-death battle. She wiped away her tears, looked straight at Clara and Arthur, her voice no longer trembling but filled with steel. "He wants a show," she said, a bitter smile on her lips. "I'll give him a show he'll never forget." From being separate, individuals pushed into a corner, they had become an alliance, ready to set a trap to expose the traitor. The alliance was forged in secrecy, and the gears of the plan began to turn. Arthur Lexington, with his extensive network and reputation in legal circles, mobilized a team of the best private investigators. "We will find the boy, Clara," he told her, his voice calm and resolute, giving her unwavering confidence. "Julian may be cunning, but he can't cover all his tracks." Meanwhile, Eleanor began to perform the best act of her life. She transformed into a fragile, vulnerable version of herself, a version that Julian had always longed for. She pretended to be severely stressed by work pressure and rumors of financial difficulties, secretly leaked by Arthur himself, made the act even more convincing. She became irritable, tired, and panicked. On some days, Clara would intentionally overhear the sound of things being smashed in Eleanor's study, followed by sobbing. Julian watched all this with a well-hidden sense of glee beneath his mask as a devoted husband. His prey was walking into the trap on her own, even faster than he had anticipated. He was constantly by her side, comforting and soothing her. "Don't worry, I'm here," he said, holding her, while his mind was already picturing the day he would sit in her seat of power. "Everything will be fine." The performance reached its climax on a Tuesday evening, in Eleanor's study itself, a room that Arthur's team had secretly wired with miniature cameras and microphones. Eleanor, with a carefully made-up, haggard face, with deep-set eyes and dark circles, called Julian in. She spoke with a trembling voice, full of defeat. "I'm so tired, Julian. I can't take it anymore. The numbers, the meetings, they're killing me. I want to hand over the management of the company to you. I just want to rest." Julian's eyes lit up. He had been waiting for this moment for too long. He stepped forward, embraced her, and whispered fake words of comfort, but he couldn't hide the triumphant smile that was about to break on his lips. He got up and walked to the small bar in the room, personally preparing a cup of the herbal tea he always made for her in the evenings. "You've made the right decision," he said, his voice sweet, but laced with venom. He placed the teacup in front of her, the amber liquid swirling. "Don't worry, my love. All your burdens are about to end. I will take care of this empire for you. You can rest in peace now." Rest in peace. The words sounded like a death sentence. The moment he finished speaking, the study door burst open. Arthur and the police stormed in. Julian realized in a frenzy that he had been fooled. His handsome face was contorted with anger and panic. At the same time, Arthur's phone rang. He looked at the screen and nodded to Clara, who was standing behind the door with him. A short message. "The boy has been found. Safe." Tears streamed from Clara's eyes. She sank to the floor, her face in her hands, sobbing with profound relief. Finally, her Leo was safe. Julian looked around like a cornered animal. He had lost. In his panic and rage, he did something no one expected. He grabbed a silver letter opener from the desk, pulled Eleanor to him, and held the sharp blade to her throat, taking her hostage. "Everyone, freeze! Back off!" he yelled, his eyes bloodshot. The police hesitated, not daring to make a move. Eleanor closed her eyes, her face pale with fear, feeling the cold blade against her skin. Julian looked at Clara, who had just stood up from behind the door, his eyes filled with pure hatred. All his perfect plans had been ruined by nothing more than a simple maid. He roared, his voice deranged. "You think a maid like you can change fate?" The whole room held its breath. Every gun was aimed at him, but no one dared to pull the trigger. But Clara did not back down. She stepped out of the shadows and advanced toward him, her eyes showing no fear. "Yes," she said, her voice calm and firm, echoing through the room, "because the fate of a traitor is to self-destruct." Her chilling composure, the inexplicable courage in her eyes, distracted Julian for a split second. He froze. How could a girl like her be so calm? Taking advantage of that moment of hesitation, a well-trained police officer, who had quietly moved to the side, lunged like a flash of lightning, using a tactical move to pin him to the floor. The letter opener clattered to the ground with a sharp, ringing sound. The act was over. Eleanor was freed. She gasped for air, leaning on Arthur. Julian was handcuffed, meaningless curses spewing from his mouth as the police led him away. Justice was served, not with guns or violence, but with intelligence, courage, and the perfect coordination of three people who had decided not to surrender to fate. Clara stood there, in the luxurious study, tears still rolling down her cheeks, but this time they were tears of victory. With a clear, recorded confession and all the evidence from the USB, Julian Vance had no chance of pleading innocent. The trial was swift. He was sentenced to many years in prison for conspiracy to commit murder and kidnapping. The empire he had coveted, the one he was willing to trade his humanity for, crumbled before his eyes like a sandcastle. The very night Julian was arrested, Arthur's investigation team safely rescued Leo. The boy was taken directly to the best hospital in the country. The complex heart surgery, which had once been a distant dream for Clara, was performed with complete success. For the first time in years, Clara saw a healthy pink flush on her brother's cheeks as he slept soundly. All expenses, of course, were paid for by Eleanor. She didn't see it as charity, but as a debt of gratitude she had to repay to the person who had saved her life. Vance Manor was no longer a cold place. Julian's departure seemed to have taken all the toxic energy and pretense that had shrouded it for so long. The sound of Clara's piano now filled the house every day. No longer were they sad melodies played in the darkness, but cheerful tunes full of hope on sunny afternoons. The sound was like a refreshing stream, washing away the gloomy memories and breathing new life into the mansion. A few months later, after everything at the company had settled, Eleanor held a major event to announce a new development strategy. Here, in front of hundreds of employees, partners, and the press, she took the stage. She looked as powerful as ever, but something had changed. The coldness in her eyes had been replaced by a deeper, warmer look. Instead of a typical business speech with numbers and charts, she told a story, a personal story. She spoke of the loneliness at the top, of the mistake of putting her trust in a deceptive facade, and of the courage of a young girl who had taught her the most valuable lesson about trust. She didn't use a name, but everyone close to her understood who she was talking about. Finally, she looked toward a secluded corner of the auditorium, where Clara was standing in a simple dress, helping the event organizers. "And today," Eleanor said, her voice catching slightly, "I want to introduce you to the person who taught me that lesson." She invited Clara to come up. The whole auditorium fell silent, surprised. Clara hesitated. She wasn't used to this attention. But at Eleanor's encouraging look and Arthur's nod, she slowly walked onto the stage. The lights shone on her, and for the first time, she wasn't an invisible shadow. Eleanor took Clara's hand. Her grip was warm and firm. She looked straight at her, then turned to address everyone, her voice filled with genuine emotion. "They say family is where you are born, but today I know that family is the people you choose to fight alongside. Clara is no longer my maid. She is my family." The entire auditorium erupted in thunderous applause. Clara looked at Eleanor, tears of happiness streaming down her face. She had found a home, a mother, a family she had never dared to dream of. Eleanor officially adopted Clara. But she didn't just give Clara a name and a home. She recognized the young woman's hidden talent, sharp intellect, and extraordinary determination. Clara was sent to study at a prestigious business school. With her hard work and innate ability, she quickly excelled. After graduating, she returned, not as an heir who only knew how to indulge, but as a brilliant manager, Eleanor's indispensable right-hand woman. Together, they rebuilt the Vance empire, making it not only more financially sound, but also more humane and ethical than before. Years later, on the very balcony of Vance Manor, which had once witnessed so much conspiracy and so many tears, there was now a peaceful scene. Eleanor, now with the gentle wrinkles of age, sat in a wicker chair, holding a cup of tea. Beside her was Clara, a successful, confident, and radiant young woman. In the lush garden below, Leo, now a tall and healthy young man, was playing with the family's golden retriever. His clear laughter echoed throughout the space. Together, they watched the sunrise slowly ascend over the city. "Thank you," Eleanor said softly, breaking the comfortable silence, "for showing me that family is not made of blood, but of trust." Clara smiled, taking her wrinkled but still very strong hand. "Me too, Mom. Thank you for giving Leo and me a second chance." Their legacy was not in the numbers in their bank accounts or the stock market value. Their legacy was the story of how two women, from two completely different worlds, found each other in adversity and together turned darkness into light.